This thing is live. Cheers, everybody. Happy Friday. I hope everybody had a great week. And this week, it was actually a joy to watch some of these committee meetings, and we're gonna talk about that a little later, especially the Public Works, the Board of Public Works Committee. That was spicy. Sometimes you watch these things and you wonder what kind of stuff is like happening behind the scenes, because it seems like a lot of them are like mad at each other when it finally gets to a public committee meeting, and man, it shows, it comes out. But not surprisingly, at the center of a lot of this was our favorite council person, Tori Jennings. So we'll get into more of that later. That was a lot of fun to watch, though. But yeah, cheers. I'm glad to have everybody who's watching this. The big controversy of the week in Stevens Point was a conceptual design for a planner, because they do these planners every year, the school district, and I think it's like student designed. And this year it was leaked at some point that one of the designs was like, it had this big like raised fist right in the middle of the design, and people took issue with that because it represents, a lot of political aspects related to socialism and the Black Lives Matter movement and all that stuff. And people like this thing blew up on social media, Facebook, which is the only social media anybody in Stevens Point uses. I mean, a few of us use, like Reddit and some of the ones where you can actually go on there and learn something. But Facebook, being the trailer park dumpster fire that it is, this thing blows up and everybody loses their minds over it. Me, like, I don't care. I don't care what they do in the school districts. I've never cared. We homeschooled, so we wouldn't have to care. But people were pissed about it, and they took it to the school board, so it became this big controversy. And, the school board came back and basically said they didn't know anything about it. They don't know where the design came from, so, I mean, who knows? Maybe they had nothing to do with it at all. Maybe this is all just a big troll job that somebody pulled off. But anyway, it turned into a big controversy. So controversy is always entertaining, and if nothing else. I mean, look, if you're spending a lot of time on Facebook, you should probably just go outside and just get away from it all, because it's such a terrible social network. But if you are on it, at the very least, treat it for what it is. Treat it for like a reality TV show. What was the one with the Kardashians? The one that made the Kardashians really famous? Like that. That's generally what Facebook really is. So anytime these controversies pop up, just ignore them or treat it for what it is. Go about your day. Probably none of this stuff is going to affect you ever in your entire life. So, and look, if you're really concerned about, the dumb shit that the public schools do, and they do a lot of it, by the way, look, I hate to break it to you, but your kids aren't learning anything in public schools. They're all being propagandized from the moment they walk in till the moment they leave at night. So, it really is such a disgusting place to be. And I encourage everybody to just pull your kids out and be done with that entire system, because it really is a horrible, horrible system. But hey, at the same time, you're the parent. Your kids are your responsibility. You do what you want with them. And, if you really want to get involved with the school board and try to make changes to the school system, I wish you the best of luck. I don't think it's going to happen. I'm not optimistic, but I wish you the best of luck. I really do. But anyway, so what do we got? We got committee meetings. It is the second week of the month, which means a lot of these committee meetings happened this week, or a lot of like the big important ones that this live stream pays attention to anyway. There's some of them we don't usually bother with unless there's something that pops up in the agenda that is pertinent to your life in some way. Otherwise, yeah, I'd be happy to be avoiding all of these, but it is what it is. So first one this week was the Personnel Committee. Really nothing to talk about there. All they did there was just agree to some tentative agreement with the local city unions, which kind of surprised me, actually. I didn't even know that Stevens Point city workers all belong to like the AFL-CIO union, but apparently they do. And so they have to sign contracts with these people every like 2 or 3 years. And it was the same thing when I worked at UPS. We were all part of the Teamsters, which reminds me, when I ran for city council, one of the groups that contacted you who wanted all your information was the union reps. They wanted to know how you were going to help the union and blah, blah, blah. I never sent that back to them. I mean, because I'm not like a big union fan. I mean, like, I understand why unions exist in society, but I mean, I'm not that big of a fan of public sector unions, because I feel like that is just, there's too much room for abuse of a system where people have no choice, because government is a monopoly, right? And so when you're a union and you're vying for power within this monopoly, it's not like people can go somewhere else and do anything about that. Teamsters is a union that controls UPS, for example. Well, if the Teamsters aren't careful to negotiate a market or somewhat market wage, then people will just use FedEx or UPS or not UPS, USPS, or some other mail service. Like, they have to be fully aware that could happen in their negotiations. I feel with public sector unions, it's just carte blanche almost. They can just come in and make whatever demands they want. And they almost have to be met by the city government, within reason. Obviously, if they're too far out there, the city governments are just going to be like, no, we're not going to negotiate with you. But like, there's no fail safe with a public sector union like there is a private sector union. But anyway, that's neither here nor there. I guess that's just a rant. But they did negotiate a deal, and I guess with like a lot of these contracts, it's just kind of the same thing. There's probably some living wage increase or something like that they do every year, or every couple of years when they renew the contracts. But other than that, I mean, it's basically the same thing. But then there was the Public Policy and General Government Committee. And as I always say, that's my favorite one. That's the one that generally pushes through all of the really bad things in Stevens Point. The ones that, really restrict your liberty in a lot of ways. This is the one that it goes through. But, lately it hasn't been too terribly bad. And this month, again, it wasn't too terribly bad. And I think I said this in a live stream last month as well, that there really wasn't anything that came through it. They go through, my favorite part is the approval of licenses, which I hate the fact that people have to grovel before people within the city that don't have a clue as to anything related to their business, and they still have to come and grovel for licenses. But there were some improvements this month. So one of the licenses that they were trying to approve were for beer sales in Iverson Park, which, great, why not? We should have beer sales everywhere. I want to live in a world where I walk down the street and instead of kids just trying to sell me lemonade, sell me a beer, especially in the middle of summer. And a lot of people will think that's that I'm being sarcastic, and I'm totally not. I think kids should be able to sell beers right out of their yards if they want to. That's the world I want to live in. I want it readily available everywhere. So Northwood's Pedal and Paddle, which if you're like an outdoors person, you know that it's like a company that they rent out like kayaks to paddle down the river, and bikes to go on the nature trails on like the Green Circle Trail. So they came and wanted a license this year to sell beer. And of course, certain members of the council, I don't want to throw them all under the bus, but Cindy Nebel, of course, had many concerns about this. But anyway, the owner of Northwoods Pedal and Paddle did a very good job of explaining, well, look, when people come here to rent kayaks from us, or canoes, they're bringing their own beer anyway. So why not sell them the beer? Why not give it to them in a form that is going to make, guarantee that there's not glass in the river and things like that. So, I mean, he did. And another point he made was that at least if we're selling the beer, we can sell in smaller amounts so that people aren't out there just getting drunk, which is fine. That again, this is something that government never had an answer for. And people just brought their own beer and drank as much as they want and did whatever they want with their trash. Most people, like 99% of people, myself included, are not going to be throwing beer bottles and beer cans in the river because we don't want to pollute the environment that we use. We like the environment that we use. That's why we're out there, and we don't want to screw that up. However, we also might like to drink while we're out there enjoying that environment. So this was a way, according to him, that they could kind of regulate that where they couldn't do this before. So here's a private company who says, hey, we can actually do something to regulate the amount of cans and bottles that people are taking out there, and we can, keep people from getting really drunk. Hey, free market solutions, they work every single time, don't they? Well, the problem is you have to go and get a license from the people who never had an answer to begin with. So that's what this was about. Anyway, so Cindy Nebel, right, I brought her up. She had concerns. She always has concerns. And she couldn't recall where they were selling alcohol in any other park. And why would we do this in Iverson? And, one of the other council members made some comments about something else that people were doing at parks. I don't remember who it was or what they said, but it struck me kind of the same. And I'm thinking, wow, here are people who sit on the city council who are being tasked with deciding whether or not this company can have a beer license in one of the parks, who obviously never even go to any of the parks to know what's going on in any of the parks. Again, this whole licensing system is so dumb. And every time I sit and watch one of these council meetings, I just groan. And I'm like, my God, this licensing system is so dumb. You're trying to get permission from people who don't even know what go on in their own parks. Why are we doing this? Why is the system set up this way? Cindy Nebel obviously has not been outside at any of our local parks in a long time. If she doesn't know that they're selling beer at Buchholz Park or at Xenoff during like baseball games and stuff, why is she making decisions about beer sales in Iverson? I don't know. I don't like it, but that's how it is. And I'm just pointing out, most of these people don't know what's going on within the city of Stevens Point, okay? As much as they would like to pretend to you that they know what's going on, and they only consider these with the greatest of thought given, and they're not, okay? They never have. They don't know what's going on half the time. This was another example of that. I just had to bring that up. There's all this concern about the parks. Most of them don't even go to the parks. They don't know what's going on. So whatever. Another one was another license was for, street closings or something like that. Okay. If you are going to grant permits for anything at all, then it should be for street closings. Okay. That should be a good and safe one that I think we can all agree on. All right. If you're going to close down a street and keep everybody in town from going a certain way or taking a certain route, get permission to do that. I'm not saying that I'm for that. I'm not saying that I don't think there's better ways of handling that. But at the very least, if you're going to have to gravel before the city for a permit or a license or anything, street closures at least are the least offensive to me. So the brewery's throwing a block party this year. And what they're doing is they're, putting on events where everybody's outside. And I, for one, am happy to see this stuff popping up in Stevens Point again. I'm glad we are finally getting over the fear of COVID. Like I said last week, Riverfront Rendezvous, or maybe the week before, Riverfront Rendezvous back on. Yeah, it's got some stipulations, whatever. The pool's open again. Yeah, it's got some stipulations, whatever. At least things are getting back to normal. I was in Fleet Farm today. Half the people in there weren't wearing masks. Thank God. People are starting to get over this madness. So the brewery's throwing a block party. Great. Look into that. Maybe attend that. Another permit was a beekeeper permit. And I think I talked about this maybe in a live stream last year. I know I brought this up before. Of all maybe some of the dumbest permits, a beekeeper permit is one of the dumbest. And actually, I'm going to talk a little bit more about this later when I'm talking about something else. But so the guy who is applying for this permit, he basically went to all of his neighbors in his area and he said, look, I want to set up a beekeeping rig here, beekeeping box. Is it okay if I do this? And according to him anyway, all of his neighbors were completely on board with it and, thought it was fine. That's how you handle things in a city if you are a responsible neighbor, okay? That's what you do. You go around and you say, hey, I'd like to do something that may impact that will actually, bees will, they'll get out there, they'll end up on other people's property. And if you're going to do something like that, you should get permission from your neighbors. I don't think you need permission from the city. And by the city, I just mean, the handful of bureaucrats that like Cindy Nebel that sit there and dictate these things to the greater city. Your neighborhood, your neighbors, talk to them. And if they're cool with it, then that should be the end of the discussion. You shouldn't have to come to and go through this process of licensing and permitting, blah, blah, blah. Anyway, so, as far as something like this seems easy, right? Where you just ask your neighbors and it's fine. But if you're somebody like Cindy Nebel, somebody of that mindset that of the city as the big mother who wants to watch and take care of everybody and treats everybody like children, she's got to weasel her way in there somehow and make sure that she knows that, you're doing stuff. Anyway, whatever. But connected to this was also an ordinance that came up. Ordinance? I mean, yeah, I guess it's an ordinance. It's like the suspension of an ordinance for the adoption of Mow May. For those of you who don't know, Mow May is something that's been going on in a lot of other municipalities for years at least. Like I remember hearing about these happening in California, like probably 10 years ago, whenever it became like the whole bees dying off thing became like a really big crisis and people were looking for ways to get the bee populations back up. Mow May was something that popped up, even way back then. The idea is to let your grasses grow and your flowers, which includes a lot of what people consider weeds like dandelions. I don't think dandelions are, I mean, maybe they're technically weeds, but I mean, I think dandelions are awesome. I think they're beautiful. I'm a little personally disappointed that, people eradicate them every year and just consider them a nuisance. But anyway, No Mow May is supposed to address the whole declining bee population by suspending this for a month, so you don't got to get out there and mow your lawn for a month. And the idea is to allow a lot more pollination to happen and provide a lot more food for the bee population. Now, of course, I think it's a great idea. Everybody on the council thought it was a great idea for the most part. But let me point out here again, and I say this ad nauseum, but here we have yet another example of mowing. Lawn care ordinances have been a part of municipal codes for what, 50, 60, 70 years, something like that. Now, the government essentially has been systematically helping to destroy the natural environment with these codes, right? If they weren't, then why would we ever need something like No Mow May? Like if No Mow May had no benefit at all, then why would we even do it, right? So No Mow May is an example of how local governments have been destroying local environments, local natural environments. So keep that in mind every time somebody like Cindy Nebel comes to the council, and there's going to be more, you just know there will be, and they want to make these kinds of declarations like, if you don't cut your grass after it gets to be 2 or 3 inches, then you're going to get cited. All right. Every time somebody comes, just step back and say, no, go home, because you don't know what kind of environmental impact that has. And this is just a good example of how that impacts the environment, how government is, by its nature, destructive to the environment. Everybody likes to blame the big evil corporations, but municipal governments with these kinds of ordinances are nationwide, everywhere, okay? They're destroying all the environments, all the local environments. So keep that in mind. I just want to bring that up as just another dagger to local government in my never-ending quest to show how utterly useless and inefficient and most of the time just stupid it is. So there's that. So there were concerns about No Mow May, of course, because people are not going to like people growing their grasses. And, so Slowinski brought up a point about how he gets complaints constantly from neighbors who have dandelions, and then the dandelion seeds, blow off into their yard, or in the fall, the leaves blow over into the neighbor's yard. That's how nature works. There's really not a lot that you can do about that. And part of living in a community where you're surrounded by other people, not everybody wants to poison their lawn with chemicals. So everybody has their like perfectly manicured, dark green chemical lawns. Not all of us are into that. Some of us we like to walk outside barefoot without getting cancer. So, if that's the trade-off, then sorry, you're going to have dandelion seeds, you're going to have leaves, leaves has nothing to do with that. Those can always be raked up. Point is, if you're living among other people, all right, little annoyances like this are going to happen. All right, that's just the trade-off. There's really nothing you can do about it. And I shouldn't say I'm shocked that people constantly complain about that stuff, but maybe just stop it. Maybe people just need a complete perspective change on a lot of these things. But, it is what it is. Bob Weir, who, if you follow these council and committee meetings for any length of time, he calls in a lot. He's got a lot of things to say. His whole spiel about Mow May is that he's concerned with the extra burden on staff, with people signing up for it and the extended hours for drop-offs, because they're waiving these ordinances for a month. And then everybody has to have everything mowed and taken care of by, I think, June 2nd was what they said. The other thing related to this was you have to sign up with the city to just leave your lawn alone. Why? Why are you doing that? You have to go get special signs that say, this lawn is a Mow May lawn. Please don't fine me. What the hell is the point of that exactly? Like, who cares if everybody just that's the point, right? Isn't this about helping the bees? But of course, the city they can't help themselves for giving up the revenue generation aspect, can they? So you got to go and, like, even in this case, to do nothing, literally to do nothing, to just go about your day, you still have to go get permission from the city to do that. Am I the only one that thinks that's insane? I cannot be the only one that thinks that's insane. But that's the deal. Go get your sign, sign up, let us know that we can't fine you for not mowing your grass. How about you just don't fine people for not mowing their grass? Let everybody just do this for a month. What's the problem? All right. So anyway, the other point that Bob Weir brought up was that right around this time is when, like, ducks do their nesting, and they usually do it in flower beds. And, you know, his concern was that if everybody lets their grass grow, then ducks are going to be nesting in the lawns, which I guess didn't make a lot of sense to me, because don't ducks want like a lot of cover when they do their nesting? At least, I mean, I don't know anything about ducks. All right. I'm making assumptions here. But I always thought they wanted like more cover for their nests, and nobody's going to be growing a lawn in the month of May that's going to, be great cover for ducks to nest. So I don't know what that's all about. I kind of thought that was a stupid argument, but maybe I'm the stupid one, because like I said, I don't know anything about ducks. Maybe Bob Weir has something to that. I don't know. But yeah, so I got Slowinski in my notes talking about how neighbors always complaining about weeds bleeding into their yard. Again, welcome to the city. Welcome to dealing with other people. So the mayor basically answers Bob's concerns by saying that there's not going to be a lot of extra work with Mow May. I mean, really, it's not going to be like this huge burden, and it's not going to be this huge extra cost. Kernowski was saying that, it was Kernowski that was talking about the dandelions and the leaves blowing over in people's yards. But he is, as the city director, he has like a pipeline to, the city has their little snitch form that you can get on there, and you can snitch on your neighbors for any little annoyance, basically. That's what Kernowski is referring to about people complaining, because my gosh, there are so many people in this community that do nothing but sit and look at their neighbors and gripe and complain. There's a lot of people that apparently don't have hobbies or lives or even joy in their lives. They just have to be miserable all the time. We're going to talk about one of those people when we talk about the other committee. What's it called? Public Works Committee. We're going to talk about one of the most miserable people in town. Anyway, so Mow May got approval. It's going to go to council. Get ready for that. Get ready to not have to put gas in your lawnmower or change the oil until the end of May. How great is that? So, that's one of those things I like to put off for as long as possible. I, for one, am glad that I can put off that little task for a whole month. Building 30 code rewrite. Okay, this is something that they were talking a lot about in council last year. Now, there was a big push to like rewrite the entire municipal code, okay, everything, because there's so much overlap with different things. There's so much like out of date legal verbiage, I guess. There's a lot of duplication. So the idea was that they were going to go in there and like clean everything up. Of course, nothing is that easy when it comes to city council. There will be no just cleaning things up without a lot of arguing and back and forth. So Cindy Nebel, of course, is the first one that had an issue with this because Karnofsky actually brought an entire chapter 30, to the committee and said, let's approve this. Let's be done with this. Cindy Nebel she comes in and she says, well, when we wanted to do this, we wanted it all broken down by sections and just take it piece by piece. And this particular one is a building code rewrite. And Cindy Nebel is concerned that there's too much there and they should take it piecemeal to evaluate the code. Cindy Nebel, who, as we all know, is one of the foremost architectural minds in the United States. Cindy Nebel, who is like her expertise in the area of construction would be completely lost if she wasn't there to give her input on construction code, building code. So she's really concerned about something she doesn't understand anyway, but she wants to make sure that she can take it piecemeal. So anyway, again, it's funny to me that they have to bring stuff like this to the city council for approval. People, most of whom have never held a hammer in their lives, are going to evaluate building code and let us know that it meets their approval. Really? Again, is this the best we can do? Is this it? This is what we got. Okay. So, I mean, she has a lot of things to say about this. Look, I'll be honest. She just comes off as whining here a lot. She just whines a lot in general. And like, half the things she was saying, like I didn't really get like the point. She's just whining. So anyway, it comes back to Karnofsky, who then corrects her and says, no, you wanted us to rewrite chapter 21 of the code and bring that back piecemeal. Not chapter 30. This is completely different. So, all right. So Cindy Nebel, again, doesn't even know what she's talking about. She doesn't even remember what request she was making to Karnofsky's staff. So anyway, there it is. Polly Dalton, as usual, makes the more intelligent request and says, well, it would be cool to have the old code and the rewrite just to compare them and seeing what's being changed. She's not saying anything about how she needs to evaluate all of it. She's just interested in the changes that are being made in the code itself. Presumably because she knows people in construction that she can, talk to about this. Well, Bob Weir chimes in again. He's got something to say. He's concerned that there's not enough regs in this with regards to like historical buildings and things like that. And he just says, there's things that we need to go and review. Look, you know what? I feel absolutely horrible for Karnofsky and a lot of the other staff when they try to do things like this, because every single time they try to do something like this, it just, bam, it hits a brick wall. Because suddenly everybody's got an opinion about how they could have done it better, and it wasn't properly brought to the council, and we wanted it piecemeal, and we wanted it this way and that way. Why they even deal with that is, I guess they have to. They're obligated. They get paid to do that. But my God, what a mind-numbing and thankless task that must be. So, I mean, Ryan Kronowski, if you ever see these videos, man, I feel your pain. So anyway, Kronowski comes back in. He was like, these things have been looked over by, what did he say? He said a master plumber, an electrician, an HVAC person, basically exactly the people you want looking this code over, okay? He presumably didn't consult Cindy Nebel's expertise on a code like this, right? He asked the people who knew something about it. So, you know, this is why I could never work for city government. This is craziness. So, so the interesting thing about this is that a guy named Orrin Jacobson, he calls in to the meeting and introduces himself as an independent contractor and talks about how repairs on old buildings are exempt from the Uniform Dwelling Code under Wisconsin law. But he talks about how the rewrite would bring a lot of things not formally part of the Universal Dwelling Code into the Universal Dwelling Code, which means, you know, he was saying that, you know, simple repairs might require like a whole revamp of entire sections of a building, which fall way outside of the purview of a simple repair, right? If your kitchen sink is leaking and the sink is 100 years old, you should be able to just replace the leaky pipe or the leaky faucets or whatever's leaking, but not have to replace the entire sink. That's kind of what he was getting at here. Only it's much worse because under the Universal Dwelling Code, as he was saying, he couldn't just even replace the leak on the sink and just replace the sink, but replace the entire plumbing throughout the whole building to bring it up to code. Now, whether that's true or not, I have no expertise in the matter. I'm going to defer to this guy's wisdom. He knows a whole lot more about it than I do. And I'm going to say, you know, if this is the case, then yeah, that's a huge, huge problem. So, you know, I hope this guy kind of stays on top of it. You know, as an independent contractor, he probably gets hired for a lot of just simple repairs. And man, if he is subject to like this whole new superstructure of building code, that's going to be a big problem for his business. And I hate that. I'm not a big fan of the Universal Dwelling Code to begin with, just because I think architecture, like anything else in society, can be a work of art, or is not something that's finished. It's something that's constantly evolving. You know, if you look over the history of architecture, imagine if the Universal Dwelling Code was, you know, applied globally and came in, say, around 2000 BC, right? We would, or make it 4000 BC. We wouldn't have the pyramids. We wouldn't have like the big Colosseums. We wouldn't have these amazing churches. We wouldn't have these amazing like temples that were built, or like palaces and things like that. You could never do something like that with the Universal Dwelling Code. And that's the reason I'm so opposed to something like that. I think building things should be left to builders, as long as they know what they're doing and they can do it without their buildings collapsing and being a hazard to people, which for whatever reason, I don't know why, they've been able to do prior to the wisdom of the Uniform Dwelling Code, okay? They've been doing this for hundreds and thousands of years. Orrin Jacobson here even referred to like these 100-year-old buildings. And, you know, he made it a point a couple times to say these buildings that have stood for over 100 years, that wouldn't be standing anymore if they had to be built according to the Universal Dwelling Code. Now, it seems to me that this code is just it's just more stupid bureaucratic nonsense that again takes the expertise, the power and the expertise away from the people that actually do construction, that actually build things, that actually design things, and puts it in the hands of people like Cindy Nebel. How does that make any sense at all? It doesn't make any sense to me. And this is why I'm so anti things like this, okay? Because I feel like, we're missing out on so much. Like there can be all of these amazing things that architects in the future could be building, or new ways of building that could be discovered if they weren't hogtied by stupid codes like this. Stupid codes approved by bureaucrats. Yeah, they probably had like a council of construction people and builders who sat around and said, yeah, these are the best practices. And then politicians then took that, not even thinking to themselves that, yeah, okay, these are the best practices now, but best practices could be something completely different 100 years from now. And they codified it. And now everybody has to obey this codification, which to me is so dumb in every way. Let people experiment. Okay. Cindy Nebel, I can hear you now. What about the children? What if somebody builds something that collapses on a daycare? Yeah, you know what? Your fears of somebody else's expertise are completely unfounded and stupid. Is it never going to happen? No. Is it going to happen frequently? No. It would be a very, very rare thing. Most people already understand the mathematics of building buildings to not allow that to happen. But what the Universal Dwelling Code does is take any of the creativity away from it and puts everybody in this little box and says, here, you have to build things a certain way. That is what I think is really, really dumb about the whole thing. Anyway, end of that rant. So that got approved, the rewrite of the code. So that's going to go to council and they're going to vote on it. Things like this, honestly, the council is just going to vote and say, yes, I approve this, and push it through, mainly because none of them have any expertise on anything. It's just the way it goes. Now, finally, to the funnest part of watching these committee meetings. Wow. So the Board of Public Works this month was amazing to watch. It was fun to watch. We got to watch Jeremy Slawinski, the mayor, and Tori Jennings all get extremely irritated with each other. Actually, the mayor and Slawinski were extremely irritated with Tori Jennings. Who isn't, right? Join the club, guys. Actually, they've been more irritated with Tori Jennings probably more than anybody else over the years, having to deal with her on a daily basis. But before we get to that, just some quick things. All they did was they approved about $9 million in road repairs. They talked about having an updated concept, a new updated concept on the Plover River Crossing project, which has been in the works for quite a while now. So watch for that. Again, I think it's a cool idea. I just wish taxpayers weren't paying for it. That's my only gripe with it. I think they could have raised money for it. They could have, taken after Plover, who takes donations to build parks. I think we could have done the same thing. I would have gladly donated to that project because I think it's cool. Oh, God. The other thing was overnight parking. Now, here is another code update that went nowhere extremely fast, because this was, something that they're just presenting to the council for like an up and down vote. And there was an amendment. I believe Tori Jennings offered this amendment about it had something to do with getting permits for overnight parking in places where overnight parking is already allowed. And it was just this constant back and forth on over. This was the biggest part of the meeting, of the committee meeting, of the board meeting, whatever. Um, when it comes to parking, when it comes to the issue of parking, everybody has a different opinion about how the city should handle that. On the one side, you have Cindy Nebel, who doesn't want anybody parking anywhere at any time. And you have other people like Tori Jennings who might say, well, people should be allowed to park here, but not there, or maybe they should park in this way and have some. Look, it's all such a confusing mess. And this is just another one of those things that city council will inevitably make much, much worse than it already. It's already confusing. Nobody really understands how most of it works, where you're allowed to park, where you're not, blah, blah, blah. It's all just a confusing mess that it is. There's no uniformity to any of it. Well, it gets much, much worse tonight. So, Cindy Nebel, she chimes in. Her biggest concern is enforcement. And that she is the type that is always calling the cops on her neighbors, right? Or, using the little government snitch form to go to the property maintenance authority department. She's one of those people who, does this constantly. So, of course, she's going to have a problem with the enforcement aspect. So she wants to make sure that she can call somebody to have them take care of a problem. And I think that's why she wants all these ordinances, okay? She wants to have something in writing that allows her to look at this and say, hey, that neighbor's not doing it right. I need somebody that I can call, because she's not the type that's going to go and try to handle problems herself, because she's not a likable person. Okay. I don't know how she gets along with her neighbors. I'm guessing that her neighbors just, if nothing else, just pretend to like her, but she has a very condescending way about her, and a very whiny, condescending way about her. So people like her need this enforcement avenue. Okay. Just because people are more likely to tell her to just frick off, go mind your own business. I would probably most of the time, unless it was a legitimate gripe. But if Cindy Nebel, if she was my neighbor and she's coming over to my house and griping about half the stuff she gripes about on the council, 9 times out of 10, I'm telling her to get lost. So she wants this enforcement, and she's talking about people parking RVs in the road and vehicles with trailers hitched. And, she wants different rules for different things. And holy cow, lady. Could you imagine being one of her children growing up? I can't. That would be crazy. Absolutely crazy, trying to keep all her rules and regulations together in your head. But there is another kind of celebrity, city council celebrity, like Bob Weir is one, because he calls in all the time for these committees. But another one who will always show up without fail when it comes to parking is Nancy Roppy. Now, I don't know Nancy Roppy personally, but she is a very angry person all the time in these meetings. Wow. She is just mad. She gets on this call right away. Oh my God, she is attacking the mayor. She's like, I was told that there was going to be no more parking in whatever way she was mad about. Mayor, and you are a two-faced liar for telling me otherwise. She's a very strident, nasty, angry woman. Every time she calls into one of these, she's so mad. And over something so stupid. Can you imagine being so consumed with anger over something so dumb as parking that you're going to call into these things and just rant and rave like a lunatic? And she looks like a lunatic. Honestly, that's how she comes off. I know people are watching this and they're like, you're kind of coming off as a lunatic either. Why are you so mad about Nancy Roppy there, big fella? Well, because I got to watch her. She doesn't have to watch me. That's the difference. I don't have to either, but I do it for you. So yeah, so she calls in and she goes after the mayor about this. And, there's this whole discussion about um, what vehicles should go where and this rule and that rule. And I'm like, I can't even keep up with it. Like all the parking rules that are being thrown around. And after every single time somebody speaks, Cindy Nebel has to chime in and she has to say something about it because she, like Nancy Roppy has a lot to say about parking. You know how we solved the parking problem? I just had one of those lightning moments. We get rid of parking enforcement and there's no salary, there's no vehicle anymore. That entire department gets shut down. City saves whatever they spend on that department, 80 grand, 100 grand, whatever. And we give Cindy Nebel and Nancy Roppy, we give them spiked batons and we give them like leather jackets that say parking queens or, something like that with a lot of like glitter, because I feel like they would be into that kind of thing. And we send them out to enforce all parking for free because they would enjoy nothing more than to do that. And we could turn it into a reality show and we could sell that to like a major network or major streaming platform for people to watch Cindy Nebel go and Nancy Roppy go out and confront people and, threaten to destroy their vehicles and get in all kinds of fisticuffs. And it would be an amazing show to watch. And the rights for that show could then be transferred into Bitcoin, and the city would have like its own Bitcoin account just off the royalties of that show. Huh? Am I onto something? When I run for council again in District 2 this year, I'm going to run that. I'm going to bring that up. That's going to be part of my platform for sure. Anyway, back to all the parking craziness. So Tori Jennings offers an amendment to the parking code, which again, they just want, an up or down. Can we go with this? Can we not quibble about this, ad nauseum, because we know nobody's going to agree on this. So none of the discussion for parking is helpful to anybody. Like none of this discussion at all. So, Polly Dalton has some questions and gets her questions answered, but they're related very specifically to Tori Jennings' amendment. Tori Jennings' amendment was she wanted people to pay. I don't know if I said this already or not, but she wanted people to pay for overnight parking. Essentially, that's what it was. Because there's a lot of streets in town that say, no parking from 6 a.m. to 5 p.m. and stuff like that. But between 5 p.m. and 6 a.m., technically you can park a car there and there's no fines or anything. Well, Tori Jennings is trying to change that and make people pay for it in some way. So Nancy Roppy, of course, has something to say about that too. She's going to support the amendment. She's allowed to speak again, and she goes off again on one of her crazy lady angry rants. And this time the mayor is just like, get to the point, lady. Just what are you trying to say? And then Nancy Roppy has to stop and say, don't you tell me what to do. And just, she's going to have a hernia on one of these Zoom calls, or not a hernia, an aneurysm on one of these Zoom calls one of these times. And, so my wife is sitting there watching this with me and she's like, hey, we know that lady. Wasn't she the lady that we saw at this meeting like a long time ago? It was a meeting that Tori Jennings put on, and Mark Hortis was in attendance, and it was supposed to be for like homeowners and landlords, like a meeting for them to come and hear what the plans for the future of the property maintenance department was going to be. And so I naturally went to this as a homeowner, and Yeah, Nancy Roppy, this crazy angry lady, was at this meeting. And I totally remember her basically hijacking the entire meeting just to bitch about her neighbors. And my wife brought that up, and I was like, it is. That's the lady. I even got snarky with her in that meeting, and I was just kind of like, lady, shut up. Let other people talk. Nobody cares about your dumb, everything that you're saying. I was so annoyed with this lady. And like Tori Jennings, this was before I knew how awful she was. At the end of the meeting, I was like, look, the next time you have one of these, you need to bring a timer, because people like this, and I pointed directly at this Nancy Roppy lady, are just going to hijack it the entire time to bitch. And that's not productive for anybody. This lady is a total bitch. That's what she is. That's what she does. That's her MO. So anyway, interesting aside. Uh, so anyway, she rails into the neighbor, into the mayor, and she's like, "Oh, this is going to cause all kinds of problems for District 1 and blah blah blah." And she's just going off about it. Whatever. Kneebone comes in to say that Kneebone and Dalton both made the point that let's not add a bunch of new stuff to this ordinance now. Like the parking thing, can we just leave it as it is, please? So the amendment does not pass. They took a vote on it. And the other funny thing about Nancy Roppy is that she's using video for her Zoom call. And as they're, taking the vote, she's just seething. She's sitting there like, I mean, just lady, please, I am begging you. You got to bring down the blood pressure. You got to do what you can to bring down the blood pressure. You got to go out and like get a hobby, like arrange flowers or become a coffee connoisseur or something. Like just being so angry all the time like this. My only interactions with this lady has been her ranting and raving about her neighbors. That's the only thing I know about this lady, is she rants and raves about her neighbors. So, oh man, is that the legacy you want to leave when you're gone? Really? Ah, man, I'd be so embarrassed about that. I'm embarrassed enough by how I act out in public anyway, a lot of times, but that's a bit much. So anyway, amendment fails. They get back to just voting on the ordinance itself. And but before they take this vote, Nancy Roppy has to, she has to have one more thing to say. And she has a prepared statement. And so she sits there and, reads this prepared statement like she's ISIS, who just kidnapped American college student and is demanding that the US withdraw from Syria or something. Like it comes off like that. Like it's just very angry and like toneless and just there's nothing to it. There's like no soul in it. It's just pure hatred and anger. Anyway, like I started listening to it and I was just like, all right, lady, enough. I've had enough. I had to like skip. I don't usually do this at these meetings. Like I try to listen to everybody to get their points. Nancy Roppy, my God, I just skipped right through that. I was like, no more, lady. I cannot listen to another word you're saying. So anyway, the thing's going to council now. So overnight parking, that's the new thing. I don't really know even what they changed because nobody talked about it. Everybody just had to complain about 50 other things related to parking. And then, of course, Nancy Roppy had to come in and rant and rave about her stuff. So I don't even know what's in it. I'm sorry. I can't tell you anything. You're going to have to just read it for yourself. But the final thing, finally, and this is where things got really, the Nancy Roppy stuff is always fun to watch. It's always really spicy. But this other thing that they talked about in this board was apparently the state no longer has any laws regarding the use of ATVs and UTVs on municipal roads. And so the board was trying to, I guess, pass an ordinance that just allowed them to be used on roads. I think it was like under 40 miles an hour or 35 and under, something like that. I don't remember what it was. Roads 35 miles per hour or less. That's what it was. I did take a note on that. So anyway, I guess Slowinski brought this to the board. He was kind of behind this, and he was talking about how people, over by Brulowski Road, especially like over by Fleet Farm and stuff, people really find it useful to have ATVs and UTVs. And, it's pretty sensible. Like, I don't really know what's wrong with that. It seems fine to me. So Tori Jennings comes in, and this is where things get hot. Tori Jennings comes in and decides that there's no research that's been done on this. There is no information, no memo, just an ordinance, and we shouldn't be just pushing ordinances like this through with no discussion or appeals to authority or like all this other stuff. No information, no nothing. Okay. So she wants to postpone all discussion. So she makes a motion to postpone discussion. That's her motion. And the mayor comes back at her with, well, what are you talking about? You have a packet in front of you that has all the information here, and it has all the maps, and it has everything you need, just like every other ordinance that comes up like this. And the mayor looks very, very annoyed. Now, here's the thing. Like, I have a theory about Mayor Wiesa. I think, like, he's the kind of person who's, when he's annoyed, simply annoyed, he can rein that back pretty good, because he's, kind of a public relations guy. He's a very friendly guy. When he looks annoyed, that's when he is the most pissed off. But he can't show it because it's in a public forum, right? But that's when he's most pissed off. And this was one of those moments where you just see the annoyance in his face, like, what the hell are you talking about, lady? And so he's lecturing her about this. And, he's basically saying, don't come into these public forums and just pretend like we didn't give you any information on this. Don't do that, because that's not right. That's not truthful. She's a liar. She really is a liar. It's not like she has a way of using a lot of misleading language and statements to try and like weasel support for, her side. She does that a lot. She's manipulative in that way. But I have seen so many times where she just flat out lies about something in a public forum. Just lies. And this is one of those times, and the mayor, understandably, is pretty mad about it and calls her out about it. He talks about how they discussed all of this with the usual department heads and the heads of the various townships that would be affected by this. They talked about it with the police department. They talked about it with all the usual like experts that they would with any other ordinance. So she's just flat out lying about not having any information right now. So there is basically no requirements attached to this ordinance, because there were no requirements in like the state law that was preventing them from doing this. And so that's what they were doing here. They were trying to discuss any kind of requirements that would go along with it. Nobody had any kind of problem with that. So Tori Jennings, she tries to object with a point of order. Like, anybody who knows anything about Robert's rules, when somebody, calling a point of order is basically accusing somebody of being out of order, of stepping out of line, of violating Robert's rules in some way that is cheating other people of their say in some way. So um, that her point was I don't really know what her point of order was. I guess it was because they were discussing her motion to postpone discussion. So that was her motion. And apparently, because people were discussing the motion, she thought that was like a violate. But that's what you do with any motion. You discuss the motion and decide if you want to vote yes or no on the motion. So I didn't really get where she was going with that. But she tried calling a point of order in that point. And again, the mayor gets very annoyed with her and then goes on to actually explain how the rules work. So again, here you have a member of the council into her third or fourth term who doesn't even know how the rules work, apparently. And again, the mayor's very annoyed with this whole thing. So she's basically, what she's doing here is she's trying to shut down discussion, like any discussion. Like apparently her motion to shut down discussion should have just been adopted by everybody right away, and everybody should have just gone home and shut up. Well, Slowinski, now he's mad at her. I think he's mad at her because he has to deal with her a lot, and he's seen more of this than we can count. But he actually comes out and he says, you're not going to bully everybody into silence. We're going to talk about this. And then he goes on to make his points. Now, big argument ensues. Melissa Johnson gets into it. Tori Jennings gets on and she's like, I don't appreciate being called a bully in a public forum. This isn't very professional. Tori Jennings, this is a public video. You are a bully. You're a bully and a liar and a manipulator, and I have no problem saying any of that about you, okay? Jeremy Slowinski, he is not out of line at all, because this is your MO, okay? So get off your... It really does astonish me that people like Tori Jennings have zero objective self-awareness to even understand what they're doing. Okay. It boggles my mind how she doesn't even understand that she is in fact a bully. But whatever. She makes a statement about, I don't like being called a bully. Again, well, you are, okay, so deal with it. Or maybe don't be a bully. There's a solution for you. Work on that. So anyway, Mayor again takes them to tasks over accusations of no research having been done. And, of course, Cindy Nebel has a lot to say. And Cindy Nebel comes in and says, well, I didn't say there was no information. I just said there wasn't enough information. The mayor basically said, you guys are essentially just dumping on all of the work that the city staff did to bring this ordinance before the committee or before the board. Public Works is a board. It's not a committee for whatever reason. I don't know what the difference between the two are. But the mayor says, look, all the work has been done on this. You wait till now before you have all these questions. Like everybody had the agenda. I think Tori Jennings said, well, we only got the agenda on Thursday, and that doesn't give us enough time to look into all these issues. Well, it kind of does. You have all of Thursday to make all the calls that you want, right? Or all of Friday to make all the calls you want. So what's the problem here? So the mayor kind of takes him to task on that. So it turned into like this whole big thing, and everybody kind of gets into it over ATVs and UTVs and whether or not people should be able to just drive them on the road. in certain speed limit areas. Really? This is like the big controversy on the council? This topic, really? So of course Cindy Nebel's all concerned with the safety of the children, and as she always is, and Slowinski comes back and he's like, look, I didn't expect to just, we're not trying to just hammer this through with no discussion. We're discussing it now. So anyway, ATVs and UTVs, no action is taken. That will not be going to the city council. So Tori Jennings, in the end, she got what she wanted. It's something that's going to come up and be discussed in the future. So if that's something that really interests you in some way, if that's something that's going to enhance your life in some way, or the lives of your, you probably can't drive on the road if you're not 16 and have a driver's license yet. I'm assuming that's going to be part of the ordinance, but if that's going to be an issue for you, call these people, contact them. Maybe not Tori Jennings, because we already know where she stands on it, but whatever. That's the thing coming up. If that's something you're interested in, talk to people about it. Anyway, this thing has already gone on much longer than I wanted it to, but I want you all to have a fantastic week, and I'm going to shut this thing down. Until next Friday, we'll see what the city council does this month, although I don't think there was too much of interest on the city council, but maybe we'll have one of these great cool blow-ups that, like the Kardashians. Maybe it'll be the Kardashians on the council this coming week, and we can make fun of that next week on Friday at 7 o'clock. And until then, I'll see y'all later. Have a great weekend, guys. Cheers.